right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Glad to have everyone here today. I will call us to order at 4 o'clock on this Tuesday. And moving on to our land acknowledgement. As we gather today, I'd like to acknowledge on behalf of Council and our community that we are meeting in the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We'd like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history. And we're extremely grateful for their many and continued displays of friendship. We also thank all generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. My ask is, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? No, none being heard, we will go on to confirmation of council agenda.
That council adopt the agenda for the November 5th, 2024 regular council meeting.
Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Humphreys, seconded by Councillor Webster. All in favor? Thank you all. And we'll move over to section 5 on our agenda tonight. We have a delegation. Glad to have you here today on behalf of JP2G to speak to us. Kevin, thank you. And with that, I'll pass it over to you.
All right, thank you. You got that? Okay. Just by introduction, I'm the manager of environmental services for JP2G. Originally worked out of the Pembroke office and had been in the Ottawa office since 2001. JP2G started working for the township under a competitive bid process back in 2017, which involved the irregular compliance monitoring program. And we were approached by the township to assess the feasibility of an expansion of the site. So we put together a work program at the time, and our initial task was to basically draft up a feasibility study that identified legal, environmental, and operational issues that the municipality would want to bring to the attention of the Ministry of Environment so that we can discuss those. And where we are tonight is I finalized that study for council's consideration, and if satisfactory or if there's any changes to be made, we'll do that. And then we file with the ministry, so it gives them a full history of what their initial concerns were and how they've been addressed over the last little while. So with that, I'll start into my PowerPoint presentation fairly quickly. Just what I want to try and do is basically give you a quick overview of the study history. Not all members of council were here, obviously, starting in 2021. Basically the main issues of concern with any landfill site operation or expansion is the groundwater monitoring network, the landfill gas monitoring network and its concerns, surface water monitoring, and operations. So I'll try and hit those and go through it fairly quickly, and if we can maybe leave questions to the end, because I think I can get back to slides if we have to. So the study, the site, and I'm sure everyone's quite familiar with the site. And in fact, in my early days when I worked in Pembroke, our firm, in association with McNeely and Associates at the time, actually looked at this site in 1991. And at that time, the municipality was doing a trenching operation across the site. So I wonder if that's going to work for me. Come on. Maybe not. Anyway, the blue line shown is your licensed landfill site. It's about 2.5 hectares. The site surrounding that is about 20 hectares, and it was purchased from the Barr family to be used as a contaminant attenuation zone. So back in the early 90s, that process hadn't taken place. The bars had only leased the property to the municipality at that time, and were not interested in a sale. So the township, with help from our consulting company, started looking at other options. And at the end of the day, we basically came back to this site because a lot of the monitoring network was starting to be established, and that you can see is the number of wells that are located in around the property, and so an environmental compliance approval or a certificate of approval was issued for the continued use of this site back in 97 or so. So the proposed expansion, as we understood it back in 2021, council realized that, there is limited life in any landfill site, and the approvals process is a long road to haul through not only the ministry, but it will become a public process. But you want to have all your ducks in a row with the ministry before going that way. So as of November 2023, there's about 10,000 cubic meters left. Looking at historical records, the site receives somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 cubic meters of waste a year. So as of last year, you have like 3.5 to 5 years of life. So we initially made a proposal, as I mentioned, in the fall of 2021 to the ministry to get almost 40,000 cubic meters of additional waste. The magic in that number is that anything over that it subjects you to a much more vigorous environmental assessment screening process, and it's much more expensive. So that was the approach taken. Most small municipalities in Renfrew County and Eastern Ontario that we have been dealing with kind of maintain that 40,000 as an option. Hopefully there's a longer term solution than putting this in the ground forever. But so our initial submission to the ministry went in. They were concerned, and I'll get into the details a little more, with some surface water features towards the area that we are expanding. So after a lot of back and forth, as I mentioned, between January 2022 and April 2024, we've been going back and forth with the groundwater technical support service people and the surface water people. In the report that's in your agenda, you can see the list of back and forth that has gone on. Also, just more recently, we've dealt with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Park Species at Risk branch because we did an environmental impact study on these surface water features to assess the feasibility of expanding towards them and into that habitat. What we proposed to the ministry, and then going back and forth, so from a perspective of groundwater, the former groundwater monitoring program, which was originally designed and implemented by Golder Associates, involved about 21 wells. And some wells had a fairly significant number of parameters, chemical parameters analyzed, and some others didn't. They were sampled after an amendment to your ECA every other year. In order to support your expansion, we proposed to the ministry that we will sample every year to get a good database. So all wells will have a similar list of chemical parameters that we compare and assess impact across the site. Landfill gas, when the ECA was issued, the concern was the residential dwelling sort of to the northwest of the property. So the ministry required that the township install dedicated monitoring wells that are just to monitor gas. They're located along that side, and they're sampled or monitored 8 times a year, mainly in frost conditions, because that's when the gas will get trapped and go this way instead of vertically, horizontally. The actual Golder at the time wanted to try and get out of that program, and the ministry said that they were not in favor, that they wanted more additional monitoring, and we've certainly have quite a substantial database that indicates no concern with gas. So going forwards for any change in this, we will certainly be following up with the ministry and asking that gas monitoring be reduced. It's a sandy environment. The waste is not that deep, and it won't go that laterally, so it basically dissipates. Surface water is probably the main issue that the ministry has identified, and as I mentioned, there's a couple of creeks and a pond that we're getting close to that we've investigated. So originally there were 3 locations monitored, and we're up to 5 now because of these new features. So this slide basically shows the area around in blue, which is your existing operational area. You've finished trenching, and you're going up in the air, and you have been for 15 years or so. Our proposal is to expand that waste mound in sort of basically a southwesterly direction. And you can see on that slide, there's a pond and 2 streams, stream 1 and 2, that were identified. They are, and Adam certainly has been out there in the worst of conditions, as I have and my team. These is not a stream as we would think, like a cut channel and big flowing water. It's basically a point where the water has come to the surface and spread out over the forest floor. So it's really not that in a defined channel. It just sort of makes its way in a northerly direction, as do all the creeks in this area coming up from the road towards the north. And it's basically a function of the clay. There is a transition of clay and sandy clay and loam. So the groundwater is higher where there's more clay in the bottom versus the sand, which is further to the north. And what happens is basically dissipates and goes back into the groundwater. So our expansion area is, it actually takes into an account some part of your licensed landfill site. As I mentioned, I was involved back in '91, and I recall actually when the municipality was trenching over there, and certainly even at that time there was a high groundwater table. So it basically forced the municipality to go back to this side of the site and come up and come over. So the current monitoring results, this is these are the wells that are sampled as part of the program. Green show no indication of landfill impact. The yellow show minor impacts, and obviously the wells located closer to the waste mound show impact. We have had least 2 or 3 groundwater reviews, not only of our feasibility study and responses, but of the biannual report that we prepare, which summarizes the results of 2 years of monitoring. So from a groundwater perspective, there's not many concerns. And in fact, going forward, the robust monitoring program that we're doing right now, we will want to scale it back as part of your operations. You know, there's no use sampling a number of these wells because they're fairly close to each other. They're in the same flow path, and so we can delete them or at least reduce the amount of chemical parameters. So landfill gas monitoring, as I mentioned, there was some earlier back and forth between the previous consultants and the ministry. These gas ports are, as shown in red, are just off to the one side there between the landfill site and the closest residence, which is about 250 to 300 meters away. There has never been any indication of gas, and we certainly want to minimize the extent of that, because as you can imagine, our guys have to go, or girls, have to snowshoe in there in the middle of the winter and go to these sites. And it's a cost to the municipality, and I think after more than 10 years or 12 years of monitoring, no results, our expansion is certainly not going to increase that liability. Surface water stations. So the current surface water stations are located up in the north corner. This is where the groundwater starts to come again up to the surface. There's a number of pockets of wetlands. Not always, some of them are quite disjointed, but eventually the groundwater and or those surface waters hit the Bar Creek, which go, and we sample the Bar Creek also. So the new ones are the pond, as we call it. My gut feeling is this is a man-made thing, that somebody went in and used it for granular fill, but it's certainly full of water, and we have got preliminary results. We've sampled it now in 2004. We don't see any indication of impact, and going forwards, we hope that the ministry will concur with our conclusions. As part of the original design of this landfill site, there was a proposed what is called a infiltration pond. So again, the issue is if the groundwater, if the surface water is able to collect and go back into the groundwater, you have a much more control over it. The minister is much more happy that it's in the ground versus at surface where it is available to various animals for their consumption. Again, and we're not talking poisonous, but what concentrations of anything. Small landfills of this size usually have high sodium and chloride and total dissolved solids and things of that nature. But there are provincial water quality objectives, and we have to meet those. So the intent here was to put a pond that would collect water and try and force it back into the ground. This is a design done by Stantec that was submitted to the ministry and approved. With the expansion, we've been as part of our feasibility study, we looked at some options, and we'll resubmit or retweak this thing so it will satisfy the ministry. It hasn't been constructed, that pond, because for the most part, we hadn't seen any significant impacts. And that may be the case going forward too, but knowing the ministry, they like to see their I's dotted and T's crossed. So enough with chemistry and all that, but basically what what council and your ratepayers are more interested in is like, what services are you providing at this landfill site? We certainly are not, the expansion will not subtract from any. And I've been asked to sort of take a look at a couple of them. The first one here is a bullet that actually the municipality is approved for. It's called Municipal Special Waste or Municipal Hazardous Waste Transfer. As you know, there's a number of containers out there. At one point, the council was looking at setting up a household hazardous waste depot there. That still is still at your discretion, but given sort of the relationship with the Renfrew site, it made no sense, right? So, but it is certainly there and would be an option. It would mean you provide all the designs and their operation manuals and everything like that. So there's a significant cost to doing it. Your current operation or relationship with the Renfrew site is obviously the way to go. A reuse materials program. This is pretty common now. It's basically the attendant puts things off to the side. If anybody is interested in taking a lamp or a busted chair or whatever, or toys for their kids, they're there. If they don't move for about a month and a half, then they go to the tipping fee phase. I must say, this is a new one for me, the food waste cycler. This was something that Adam sent to me. I guess I don't know all the technology, I'm not that familiar with it, but it sort of lends itself to composting, but you know, if there's some consideration of taking food organic waste, a lot of municipalities went with other options where it was a hole in the ground and it went, they would pull it up in a bag and then send it off as a compost material to the Pembroke Area Waste Recovery Center. But this thing has a little more bells and whistles on it. We take a look at it, certainly put it in as part of the application. It doesn't, similar to like the household hazardous waste transfer site, it can be included conditional upon possibly giving them more information. Similarly with composting, the site is a little tight for windrow composting, but this food waste cycler seems to take the volume down quite significantly. So it certainly can be done. So my next steps, it's budget time for all municipalities. So I've been asked to get budgets by the end of the week. So they're in draft form, and pending some discussion here this evening, we'll certainly have that done. We will want to file this expansion feasibility study with the ministry. There's a couple of things that you go back and look at it after a month and a half. There's some things I'd like to just tweak myself before we send it, and then ask for them to review it and get back to us with any comments. As part of that is a preliminary stormwater management report, which is basically that infiltration pond and how we're going to manage the water and the surface water features that we're encroaching into. And as part of that, the Ministry of Environment has asked that we consult the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, if that's what they're still called, and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And our biologist is ready to do that once the report's done. So I'm ready to take any questions or.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Opening it up. Any questions from anybody? Yes, Councillor Webster.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Kevin, for your presentation. Just a couple things. So what is your timeline to file? When do you expect it to go ahead?
For the application for the ECA? So part of my budget submission for next year would be to include the activities required to file. So, and which would mean, right now, there are documents that are part of the license to operate the site, the design and operations report, so it'll get changed to include these additional activities. It'll also include the monitoring program that the ministry comes back and accepts. So if we file this study that you have in your agenda, plus the other 300 pages of appendices are behind it, to the ministry, if they get it, let's say January, February, get back to us, a little back and forth, you know, we could probably file late spring.
Okay. Of 25, of 2025. sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
There will be a public consultation process required, which is basically notification and a public meeting, but it's up to council how, there's no prescribed requirements other than neighborhood notification. Most municipalities would go a little further than their neighbors, but obviously. And it's gives an opportunity also just to show some of the things that you're looking at doing, you know, to help diversion, you know, some of the things. So if that can all fall in together in a 4 to 5 month program, yeah.
Okay, great. And the other question I had, do you expect any holdup? So you mentioned regarding, say, the composting and the food saver program, is that would be, they could put a question on that? Would that hold up the process at all, or that would be to be confirmed later type?
Yeah, similar to what happened with the household travel, you know, the hazardous waste transfer site. The design and operations report will describe it, and it's what you plan on doing. But more than likely, the ministry may conditionally accept it, right? You know, as they did with the transfer station. In order for that hazardous transfer station, you'd have to file a very detailed operations and management plan to implement it.
Right.
But no, I've been doing this for 35 years, and technologies keep coming and going. Some of them, you know, and like I said, I really don't know a lot about that technology, but it's fairly easy to get an idea, get the specs from the suppliers, put it as part of your application.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Campbell?
So I guess all in all, we have a pretty good report card for being ambassadors or good stewards of the land, along with the help of your services. There's no red flags that have come up over the years with the current, other than the concern of
This surface
Surface
water
water.
thing, yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, basically there's a regulation 23298, whatever. So it's not like we're trying to do something that is illegal from an environmental point of view, but basically what we will do as we get into that environment where the groundwater is basically at surface, we put in a meter of clean fill before I start landfilling over it. So it's almost like just to keep your waste right out of standing water.
a little buffer,
Yeah, and it's just a meter, you know, and that submission has been in front of the ministry since 2021, and they've never really balked at it. So, and it's not uncommon in areas in this environment. There was no significant habitat in this area. One butternut tree.
Yep.
The health, I'm not quite sure what it was, but no bat cavities or nothing of that nature that would be a significant showstopper. Knock on wood.
Okay.
That's what they've told me so far.
And lastly, so a 3.5 to 5 year lifespan? as-
Potentially, like, at
as
your
it is.
current rate of landfilling, yeah.
Okay,
So you have a bit of time to sort of follow up on your question. So if we get this thing in, let's say the summer of next year, typically the ministry is a year before they approve it. So you've certainly, you're ahead of the game because you're not going to run out of space before they're going to issue the ECA. And that year is basically, it sits there because it's making its way up the pile. It's a frustrating process, but that's sort of the way. So this pre-consultation that we've done, these are the people that are eventually going to approve it, and if they kind of give their official okay, everything's good, then the rest is paperwork.
Fair.
And, of course, a check for $22,500 to the
Absolutely.
province.
Money makes the world go round. Thank you very much, Kevin, and thank you, Deputy Mayor Proctor.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Any other questions?
Yes, thank you very much, Kevin, for that presentation. Yeah, my question was answered for the longevity of the next phase. And when should we start phase beyond that?
Well, we looked as part of this, like, what options do we have? You can't go any further. If, let's say, the north is directly to the river, but
Yeah.
you can't go any further west because that's private property. You can't go east because we're already in a surface water environment. And that is very similar to what is out to the north.
Yeah.
It is pockets of high groundwater, if this approach, and you get your 30,000 or 32 or 3,000 cubic meters, and the environment seems to, and the limit, like the groundwater monitoring program, the surface water program doesn't identify any significant changes, well, then you have the basis, the scientific basis upon which maybe to go a little further to the north.
No.
But it is not certainly, like, there is not just standing water on the forest floor. There are big cattail marshes in there.
Because Horton is residentially growing, so I just wanted to know what their next step was for, the next down the road.
Yeah, well, that's right. It's a good point, Mr. Mayor. Like, this gives you another 30,000, so, it only really gives you another 10 or 15 years, right?
Thank you, Kevin, for that presentation.
Any other questions? No? Number of questions posed were exactly where I was going. Just wanted to confirm I was understanding. So right now, we have a capacity calculation of a 5-year life expectancy for it because we are filling at approximately 2,000 square or cubic meters
Correct, yeah.
per year, not accounting for potential offloads or alternatives. Adding these 30,000 cubic meter space gives us 15 years. And, okay, so I am understanding that math correctly.
Yeah, that's basically where you're at, yeah.
Okay, and knowing that it takes approximately about a year and a half for administration, right, of the year for the ministry and approximately half a year for us, we're in good stead to offset the 5-year ledge. But then our future ledge, what I'm hearing from you, and thank you for the expansion, is this expansion is likely one of our last capable ones in that location.
It is certainly going to be much more of a challenge at that site.
Okay, so
Sort of going to that one slide, when you look at the monitoring wells that are down there, as I move that waste mound obviously closer towards the river, and the property line at the Bar farm, it's getting closer. But that being said, it is a very weak leachate plume, as one would expect. And, there is possibilities But it's kind of like take this step and see what the environment, how the site works environmentally. We don't all of a sudden get a huge spike in something that we wouldn't expect, and there is a possibility. You're gonna have a waste mount going on that north side of 140, about 200 meters. So if you took that and went north 100 meters, you get a fairly large waste footprint.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And that's, if I can, just as an add-on to that then, so the 15 years additional life expectancy with the assumption that there's a flat consumption, right? Knowing that we are growing, means that that would be the best case scenario. So my question to you is,
Yeah.
in looking at other landfill sites, what are reasonable expectations of having a reuse program or the alternatives of composting? And I know the food cycler technology is new for you, but the reuse program and the composting from a level of reduction of our capacity consumption.
Yeah, Horton is fairly unique in that they have got approval from the ministry to do grinding of all their waste, and use it without any sand cover. That's fairly unique. In most municipalities, you get approval to grind and use it as cover, but still have to add sand or whatever that, and that's been basically a function of having a local contractor close by. You can do it. It's a cost to do that, but so is sand. So, that decision was well before my time, but, it certainly is quite unique. So, and your operator, who I've known for years and at other sites too, is very good, right? So he's good at what he does. So you maximize that out for sure. Looking at waste diversion options, and obviously as some know, the province is taking a new approach. Whether that's going to increase diversion rates or not. We did sort of a waste composition survey. I guess that was last year, Adam? Was that the year before? Yeah. So it's a matter of education, trying to get people to divert as much of their blue box type materials and their cardboard and everything as you can. And organics are a huge weight, but they kind of dissipate pretty quick. So it's a cost benefit whether this technology is going to work, and that from it you can get a product that you can get rid of, because you won't be able to stockpile it much on your site because it's pretty tight. But it's interesting. It's an interesting one. But yeah, I tell you, since COVID, the numbers at most municipal, and particularly municipal landfill sites that service a high cottage or seasonal tourist group, like the volumes of material has skyrocketed by 50% over the last 5 years. It was just because everybody was renovating or demolishing or whatever, and you've certainly seen it. You were very lucky to be able to divert all the damage from the flood away from your site, because that site would be full. It really would, so. Applaud council for being good stewards of maintaining that site, but other options, yeah. I think there's no magic box yet, but there are a lot of materials now that are becoming more and more of interest in the marketplace, such as construction demolition waste. People are starting to reuse that. It's becoming more cost effective versus brand new lumber or brand new asphalt signals and brand new gypsum board and whatever. Like I see in the Toronto market where we do some work, or the Highway 7, all that stuff doesn't even go into their sites. People are just picking it up and processing. So I can see Ottawa doing the same thing. You're just down the road.
Thank you. Really appreciate that.
Okay.
This is great information. I do believe there was one question there from Adam.
It's more of a clarification that since the 90s, we have on average taken in 2,700 cubic meters per year at the site. Our high set numbers are based on an intake rate of 2,000 meters per year. We are highly unlikely to see those numbers dissipate as Horton grows. So these upset life cycles are high projections. The more likely scenario is we are going to see a reduction in these life cycle expectancies as Horton grows, and if we don't mitigate the intake and try to find these type of diverse reuse programs that we're trying to build into this ECA. If, the projections are what we're looking at, by 2035, we're looking at the next expansion or another option to start diverting it out of state, possibly, which could be very expensive. That's why these things are important to build in now and explore as much as we can.
Yeah, oh, I agree, yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that. If there's no other questions or clarifications, I'm being heard. Thank you
Thank
for
you
all
very
of your
much.
work, and thank you for your presentation. You made it very consumable for a very long and very detailed report.
Yeah, I could
Thank
talk
you.
chemistry all night, but that will bore you the heck out of you, so. All right, yeah, let me know a next step, if things are good, if there's anything in that report that you want changed, let me know. If not, we'll kick her out.
Just say if we could explore maybe if there is the other option, instead of composting anything that we do or built into this ECA, that we could explore the course of it without reopening it would be beneficial to the township, I think.
Yeah, any options out there, we can certainly, put it in. Okay, certainly, thank you.
Thank
a
you
good
very
evening.
much. Have a fantastic evening. All right, that concludes our public meeting portion. We'll move on to section 6 of our package tonight and minutes from previous meetings. Thank you, Adam. Minutes are on page 27 as 6.1. Can I have a mover to accept minutes as presented? Thank you very much, Councillor Campbell, and seconded by Councillor Webster. Thank you. All in favor? Passed. And we will move to section 7. Are there any business items arising from previous minutes? None being heard. We will continue on to the meaty part of today's agenda, which is committee reports. We have a number of them, so I will start with section 8.1 and hand it over to Chair Campbell.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Proctor. On page 30, I'm sure everybody's had a glance at the building report. New technology. Yes, so on the building report, as you can see, we're closing in on the 2022 value of permits. We're boasting 15 new residents, and I guess in keeping with theme, 7 demos. So you can see that, when you look at the renos, commercial, residential, 19 being the number. We do have concern when we start seeing that as our township grows. There is a cost that comes with that. So, and then good to see garage and storage for building and commercial residents, keeping everything locked up, because again, that seems to be, we can keep our police costs down without those issues coming to light. I think we're doing quite well. Are there any concerns or questions with the building report as shown?
If I may.
Certainly.
There, again, I know we've talked about it in the past, but it's still, I'm intrigued again by the date deemed complete by county, which often seems to be, if not the same day, very close to the same day. And then the date received by township does seem to be that 2 to 3 month window. Sometimes a little earlier, sometimes a little later, but on average, that 2 to 3 months. It would be ideal to understand a little bit more of what's going on between there. I know we've had a lot of good pickup with having planners here at township offices, but if that's the standard to be setting with individuals, that date received by county is always at least a 2 to 3 month before the township gets any view to it. I'd love to know a little bit more on that, because my understanding is certainly township, and I'm looking to Nikki here to see if I'm speaking to, has no visibility to it during that time frame. Okay, thank you, Nikki. And then certainly that next back to county, just setting that expectation and recognizing if that starts getting a little longer, or if it's just always 2 to 3 months.
Well, through the chair, through you, Deputy Mayor, you know, the expectations of what they're telling us that start to finish window would be, yeah, we should be able to close in on that and see if we're hitting those highlights and or why not. And again, within the report, we're totaling roughly 30 severances. So we're not sure if that's just expansion of properties or, you know, building lots, or will there'll be residential dwellings. But even if you took a 2/3, 1/3, the growth for Horton is certainly on the uprise. So as it'd be interesting to see as this unfolds, if these 30, how many of the 30 severances suggest that a new dwelling is going up. Are there any questions on the severance report? Not hearing any or seeing any. I believe that is my report, Deputy Mayor Proctor, and I'll hand it back over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Campbell. We'll move on to community committees, and we will start with Councillor Humphreys, please, on section 8.21.
Yeah, the Renfrew and area senior home support meetings last week. Still working on fundraising. They're still trying to work with, do more with less money is a big thing. Volunteer drivers are always busy. Lots of fundraisers going on, from the Green Anvil to poinsettia sales, spaghetti suppers, trivia, and the senior Golden Age Activity Center has now got 320 members. And they're involved with everything from bus trips to, you know, having stuff on the main street, and a lot of people in there. I was stopped by the other day, and it's interesting to see how many people are involved, from, as I said before, from doing chair yoga to, you know, chit-chatting and having coffee, and it's so nice to see it well used on the main street. So that's my report. Might as well just go right to Chamber of Commerce. We had our meeting on the last Tuesday. We had our banquet, which was really nice. It was called the Pinnacle of Business Excellency Awards. New format, new strategies, new layout for memberships. And it was so nice to see probably 120 to 130 people there, mingling and having supper and the awards. And they recognized all the businesses before the show or before their presentation. So people were introduced, and the rebranding is coming on strong, and we've got some corporate people we're going to work with now with UPS and Esso, just to name a few. Of members will get discounts and those things. So anyway, a great opportunity to see people out mingling and talking, and you know, as we go into more details, we'll bring them on to the township. So there was a winner from Calabogie, and there's a winner from Douglas, so we got to get Horton in there now too. So. And that's my report. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Humphreys on the Seniors Home Support or Chamber of Commerce? Okay, none being heard. Pass back to you then, Councillor Campbell, the Renfrew and Area OPP Detachment Board.
Okay, so on page 33, the Joint Police Services Board, Renfrew OPP Detachment, 2025 budget. So I'm sure everybody's had a chance to read, and I'm glad they've broken it down in our steps. We're a little slow coming out of the gates with getting our committee formed, our public members, the training, you know, the a few conferences right off the hop, and now we're just kind of getting into our own where our budget, we're certainly into budget talks. You've seen the numbers there and justification of. So as it says under recommendations, information only, report to be brought back at the next regular council meeting. Again, there's talk going back and forth, again, for, under the budget for remuneration, for insurance, and then, you know, our overall costs and the shared cost of that over the 7 municipalities being Horton, Admaston, Brumley, Whitewater Region, McNabb, Braeside, Greater Madawaska, Renfrew, and Arun Pryor. And again, I'll leave it there and ask for questions or concerns at this time. So we'll, Councillor Webster, fire away.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. I've got 3 questions. I just want to I asked our treasurer today to come up with the last 10 years and of OPP billing, and this is tying into the increased costs that we're getting with the OPP. So looking at the sheet that was left on your desk in regards to the OPP billing costs, you can see it's all over the map of it's gone up and down. So basically it's gone up 60% over 10 years, but 4 of those years we had a reduction. So really for 6 years it's gone up average of 10% a year, which is incredible. Now this year's expected billing increase is going to be another 97,500, which is a 3.4% projected levy increase to the taxpayer. Plus this is where it ties in, the Equal Share Detachment Board. If we're going with the equal share, I've got a question on that as well, of 16,000. So we're going to be over 4% levy cost for OPP alone this coming year. And I understand it's across the province and everything else. And on average, through the paperwork we've seen in regards to local municipalities, their increase, it's above 20% average across the other local municipalities. So I mentioned this to their CAO. Is there any way we can get an average across the province? Because looking at OPP billing, if the province has increased it to the taxpayer by 20%, you know, obviously that's not fair, and we've got to support a resolution later on in our meeting in regards to that. But across the province, they're allowed to increase 20%. I would like to know those numbers, if that's the case. And maybe you have some insight on that now.
So I haven't seen any average across the province. I have seen various municipalities indicate what their increases are, and some are as high as a 37% increase from the previous year. So as again, it is province-wide, we do have voices at the Roma board as well as AMO that are voicing our concerns, as well as plenty of action resolutions that are being sent to all provincial agencies to identify our concerns and requesting that the province absorb these increased costs to the municipalities. So I'll explain a little bit more of that later, but as far as an average province-wide, I haven't seen anything, but I can certainly take a look into that to see if there are some numbers floating around.
That would be great, just to see if this is across the province, at least a minimum of 20% downloaded to the ratepayers. And not too long ago, they were giving out rebates.
Yeah.
2-3 years ago, they were giving out, not rebates, but a lesser charge for the municipalities. And it's just hard to comprehend, rather than we're getting these spikes and then deficits, and then it's just, if we as council ran our budgets like this, I don't think we'd be reelected with those numbers that they're showing us. So that was one of my questions. Was proportional or equal billing ever discussed at your meeting?
So a great question. So At our first budget meeting, they put a proposed budget together and gave it to us. First out of the gate, we're discussing payment for our board members for remuneration pay, flat rate, and as opposed to handing in mileage sheets and per diem and stuff like that. So there's lots of talk about that, and then it came to the meat and potatoes of it. And first off, I guess I was the first or second to speak up saying that we wanted to do per household, not, all in the pot. So there was talk about that right at the start. Now, unfortunately, the way it works is unless it's unanimous throughout all the 7 partners in this, that it goes one way or the other. And right now, it's that everybody wants equal billing. We're the second lowest household, which make up just a little over 7%, if I'm not mistaken. And Master Brumley is just making a little over, mid to high 6%. So on page 39 of your report, so you'll see the breakdown percentage. So yes, I was close. And Master Brumley is 6.58%. Horton is second lowest at 7.7. And then if we jump up to our highest, we're looking at Town of Empire at 22.28. So if it's beneficial, of course, us being the lesser of the households, obviously we want to be standalone. But then the other side of the coin, as we're speaking of the operating expenses and the increase on that end of it, once it goes up, we're looking, what can we do to lessen it? So unfortunately, I was not in attendance at the last meeting, but I'll certainly at the next meeting we'll see where we're sitting. But as the report shows that I think it's in favor of a shared service as opposed to per household. You can see where the budget would sit and how it works out for us individually and as a shared. But yes, it was certainly brought up. I certainly voiced our opinion right off on behalf of the township, having sat here and trying to do what this council and our past billings. As much as we're a small community, we're having a hard time justifying the cost and of the operating cost, let alone the service board now on top. Both beneficial, and I must say, I must give a nod to our chair. The chair of our committee is, he's got his head in the game. He's experienced, and he brings it up both ways. He argues both sides of the table. We're not all tied by the wrist with one rope, and if we vote, he pulls the rope. It's certainly not that. He wants to hear from each municipality. So as this is for just to oversee and get a feel for it, because obviously the council has to decide and give direction on which way to go. But our board chair, Rob Tripp, certainly is fair and is sitting there fighting for us as individual and as a group. And as it's shown here that certainly he, as well as the board, would come out and do a presentation where we could hit all the highlights before budget time. But as it is right now, we're just taking this as information only. But you can kind of see the flavor of it, and we'll see what the next meeting brings. And I didn't look on my agenda to see if it's usually the second Wednesday or Thursday of the month. So
Okay, I have just two other things in questions or comments. If you could, if you don't know the answer, which is fine, if you can
Yep.
just bring to the next committee for answers. So staff had asked some questions from the board. They submitted their questions and they haven't heard any response back. So could we have a follow-up on that and get a
Absolutely.
response from the board?
Yep.
Very valid questions there. And then my third thing was the, so this employee that's proposed in the budget here that they want to hire, 20 hours a week, I believe it was, and whatever. So it would be employee of the Renfrew and Area OPP Detachment Board. So with all that, have they got all the policies in place for hiring, like the code of conduct and example and all? Is that all in place?
That's absolutely, that is all in place there. We started off with the, our initial training for anybody being on the board, whether it be public member, or one of the 7 members and or staff, that everybody, had to, pass that part of the exam first. Background checks, the whole bit. So everybody was brought up to speed on that. Second part of it was a heavier training session that everybody had to pass before we're complete voting members for the committee. So everybody is up to speed. Again, I've been waiting to give a presentation, but with budget talks and stuff, it was informal at the time until it was sent to our individual municipalities. And again, we're still waiting on some, see what joint efforts we could do for our insurance provider. Because what they're still doing is they're, this, and again, as it reads here, they've put together a budget because it's a brand new board. This has never been seen before. And they're trying to cover all the bases, and then the reporting coming back will be like every 3 months or semi-annual. And we'll review at the 6-month in to see if we're right on track. If there is, if we've allotted for more money, then it'll be either put in a reserve and or return back to the municipalities. So, but certainly the questions asked, we'll make sure we get those sent back, because again, I think we're moving forward in one sense, and in another, we're still trying to compare with other groups, other boards, to see what they're doing. Because there isn't, we don't see a particular model that suits everybody, which to me is a little bit different, where you think if our group is 7 here and another group, Southern Ontario, and you know, what is everybody doing? Are we using the same model? Are we using the same strategies? Are we using the same insurers? So stuff like that will unfold and hopefully provide savings. But yes, I'll certainly, the next meeting coming back should uncover a lot more flavorful conversation.
Very good, thank you.
Is there any other questions? Deputy Mayor Proctor.
Thank you very much. Just wanted there's a few points of clarification, but I'll start with at the very top of page 38, where it does in the box mention that there is a decision being requested of us at council, whereby the budget is being asked to be approved in coordination with equal billing to all of the 7, and asking us to, if we are not in a position to support that, to come back with an alternative. So just point of clarification, are we being asked for a decision this evening?
So through you, Deputy Mayor, no, I just wanted this report as information tonight only, to let it sit and simmer with council to see if there are any further questions. But I do plan on bringing a report forward to the next regular council meeting so that we can have that fulsome discussion. And whether or not we are supporting the 2025 budget, approving it, receiving it, and then what we're going to do with the equal billing versus proportional.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. If I can go down, I had made a number of items, and I so appreciate the point that Councillor Webster brought up as well of the equal versus proportional. I think leaning into equal, I understand why, that in my reading of this, and I did look up the Ontario regulation of the OPP detachment boards, does, within its provision, require equal billing unless there's a unanimous aspect by all members of it for R7. So I understand certainly township or town of Arnprior and town of Renfrew looking for equal billing. It would be in their benefit, and if we are not unanimous, it would default to equal. I would offer and encourage in your bring back of conversation that we certainly can't support equal, given that it's more than double our price and paying the same for townships that have more than double the households, and arguably, when, as Councillor Webster brought up, the number of activities that the OPP serves within our community is more than half. So I would appreciate while I think we are being forced to support equal,
Yep.
that's okay. What I would like to do is encourage that the next time, because this was the first time that this board regulation has been put out, that for next year, we might have to proverbially absorb it this year, but for next year, we would certainly lean into more of an appropriate proportional. And I'm mindful that that may then require proportional voting. I know that was mentioned in here as well, to allow that respect. The other one is, if I may, just a few points, and I can certainly document these later for minutes for you within your next board meeting, is the honorarium relative to the remuneration, I think is a very touchy topic relative to Ontario Board versus Municipal Act. I dare say that there is some duplicity in there or misalignment between those two, because while we certainly want all of our public members to be remunerated, existing council members representing our townships, as the Municipal Act sets out, we have remuneration in place. So I'd love to get some alignment on that. The next one is around travel. In one of my Google searches on why the OPP decided on these boards of the certain types, it was to enable proximity with the OPP bases, which would almost then infer that travel seems a little not required, given that we're all within a certain radius of the OPP station. So I'd ask if you could question just especially as we get this off the ground and we're all facing such high costs, as Councillor Webster said, from the OPP, does this have to be so high? The last 2 points I'll raise are 20 hours per week for the services as described in here. Seems very, very high. I'm optimistic that existing policies exist, that other townships, other boards across Ontario could share policies and share activities such that we wouldn't be recreating and having someone work half a week on doing that. And my last one that I will mention is certainly and I'm sorry, I will get to it, the provision of actually, you know what? I'm going to scrap that one. I think those are more than enough of the topics that I've raised there. So I do appreciate this is a lot of extra effort, so I so appreciate you digging in and advocating for wee but mighty little Horton and ensuring that the OPP is a strong aspect of our community, but equally not downloading all those costs onto our taxes. Thank you.
And again, this is why this is more of a informative. Some of it is, as you say, it was likely going to be set in stone due to the numbers. The remuneration costs or compensation was stressed to us at the start, which I questioned in the same way. I said, I can print or walk to the OPP station or to downtown. And they said, understand that the board is separate. When you walk in here and sit down at the board, you do not wear your councillor hat. That's why it's separate, so it has a separate budget. They said, when you go back to your township, you have your councillor hat on, but you're to inform, and certainly the council has say But that's what they're saying, because it's a newly formed board, they said it's totally separate. Because I questioned it right off the hop. I said, why are we having this? They said, one has nothing to do with the other. One is a separate voice, and but the board is the board, and it's not like the old CPAC committee where you're just like a committee chair on that. They said you are, and that's why the conditions are more stringent, the training, and you know, the oath for it and everything is a completely different hat that you're wearing for it. So when it was explained that way, I said, okay. When they're looking at having, you know, a third party for organization and representing, again, I think I would like to see the board come out here and do a presentation on that level to show exactly where they're coming from, because it was a lot more than what I thought I was chairing, and because this is a one-off, this is a fully new board with a lot more discipline, with a lot more voice, and a lot more obviously a lot more input directly to our police services. And unfortunately, it's going to come at a price, and it's just where we can gather in on that. But I'll certainly I appreciate all the comments. That's why this is just more of a look over, because when we go back and we meet again, it'll be a joint discussion, and I certainly have my notes here, so I'll tick those all off, make sure we're represented well, and again, with the operating costs and then this on top, it's a poor year, but we're lucky to have the services of the police when we need it, but we certainly need to question the cost for our municipality of our size. So thank you, Deputy Mayor. Is there any more questions or concerns? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, good debate, good discussion. Moving on to County Council. I had the pleasure of being in county for a few different meetings in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks time period. A number of committees and a number of council, county as the whole sessions. So I wanted to raise just a few items. One that I know we're going to be talking about is certainly there was an awful lot of discussion about the OPP funding and the slight but still appreciated offset by the OMPF, if I've got the acronym correct, to that, and certainly we'll talk about that in the motion coming forward. One item that I did bring up in particular was certainly around the expansion of Highway 17. You may have all noticed that it's not in any press releases or any information disclosed by the province recently. So that is an area that has been continuously discussed, and there are reach outs to the province and through other associations to find out where it is. I worry that some of those funds have been redirected, but the questions are being asked all the same. There was a good amount of discussion on the makeup of county that I would encourage others to be watching and looking for, because as the discussion of budgets is in full swing right now, there is pursuit of where can we be finding efficiencies. So the meeting last week, I believe on the 28th and then furthered on the 30th, were very good around looking for efficiencies within the committees and standing committees and the whole. One other item that I want to bring up was that there was there were a number of very good delegations, but one of which was around children's services and children and family services within the county region. What a brilliant organization that we have in our backyard. I have started conversation to see if they could come and have a delegation with us to present some of their services. That I dare say that portion of our population is sometimes forgotten and not always seen. And Horton is not immune to it. So learning a little bit more of their services and what could be available to our community as we enter into the winter months where I'm already looking out the window, it's dark already. We're maybe in our homes a little bit more, and what support we have for each other. Outside of reading websites, have folks come and update that with us. That was all I had for county as an update. Were there any questions either? And thank you so much, Hope, for sharing that with the updates with people. Were there any questions or items that were wanting to be raised? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to correspondence summary and page 44 in our package. Any questions or remarks on the information that was provided in our package?
Yes, it's just, it was a good read about our, their health unit's been busy with still the COVID, still flu season, still RSV. It's nice to see the health unit been busy with the schools, doing immunization checks, working with the students for like drug overdoses and et cetera. So it was a nice read about all the things they're expanding to for the Renfrew County Health Unit and how busy they are. Thank you.
Thank you. One item that I noted that I was intrigued by was within the AMO update, the confirmation again that the municipal tax property reassessments are being continued to be deferred. We'll leave that. So the MPAC continues to be based on 2016 values, and that will continue to be an item, and I'm staring at Tally right now, that we'll be looking forward to in the future to reassess. So that was my only remark, but appreciate all of the information provided to us as well. All right, action correspondence, some fun. So section 9.2.1 on page 45, and just as a point of process here, I will ask Hope, is this something that you would like to speak to us for? Thank you very much.
So in your package, you see a few support resolutions in action regarding the OPP billing increase. And I just want to go over a couple points in terms of what we are seeing province-wide and why we're bringing this forward as a support resolution. So OPP provides service to 329 out of 444 municipalities in Ontario. The price for services is going up given an increase in the workload and salary increase. And this past summer, OPP ratified a deal that made its officers the highest paid in the province. This is not an issue with our local detachment, but the OPP overall. We're not the only municipality that's been caught blindsided by this increase. There was no prior notification that this was going to occur to municipalities to prepare for budgets. The OPP salary and benefits account for roughly 90% of the OPP municipal costs. And under the Community Safety and Wellbeing Act, salaries are paid by the municipalities policed by the OPP. So the resolutions in this package are basically calls for action to the province to immediately implement sustainable funding for rural municipalities by reabsorbing the cost of the OPP force back into the provincial budget. And this would allow relief to both capital and operating needs for municipalities while having minimal impacts to the province of Ontario. And while it was referred to OMPUF being increased to offset the OPP costs, we saw an increase to our OMPUF by $10,000 versus an increase to our OPP municipal cost of $97,000. So they don't relate to one another. So under the resolution portion, the action to support from the Council of the Township of Horton will be coming up for consideration.
Thank you, Hope. Any questions, comments? No. I dare say I speak for many of us that I am thrilled that while individually we may have to absorb this, that the collective voice of our fellow neighbors across Ontario and within the county are raising voice to this. I am very optimistic that while I strongly support and so appreciate the efforts that our police force does, our ability to absorb this is just not feasible. I appreciate a lot of the wordings in here, and I so appreciate that you've brought this forward for us. Thank you. All right, moving on to bylaws, none being in our package. We will have notice to file motion for next council meeting. Okay. Section 12, council or staff members' concerns. Councillor Webster?
Thank you. I forgot to ask when I called the other day, how did the training go for staff?
It went very well. It was more of a team building event in the afternoon. Unfortunately, we had 2 staff members that weren't able to attend, but it was a very good chance for us to get out of the office and have a great time with one another. And as I said, build the teamwork that we've continued to build over the last several years.
Very good, thank you.
Very nice, very nice. Any other questions from staff or councillors? None being heard. All right, we'll move on to resolutions, and I hope I will pass that over to you.
That council received the following reports as information: October building report and planning files report.
Moved by Councillor Webster, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. All in favor?
That council received the community committees and county council updates as information.
Moved by Councillor Campbell, seconded by Councillor Webster. All in favor?
That council received the CAO clerk's information memo for November 5th, 2024.
Moved by Councillor Humphreys, seconded by Councillor Campbell. Thank you. All in favor?
Whereas it is apparent that the Ontario government has overlooked the needs of small rural Ontario, and whereas Ontario's small rural municipalities face insurmountable challenges to fund both upfront investments and ongoing maintenance of their capital assets, including roads, bridges, water, wastewater, municipally owned buildings, including recreational facilities, libraries, and other tangible capital assets. And whereas small rural Ontario's operating needs consume the majority of property tax revenue sources. And whereas small rural municipalities of 10,000 people or less are facing monumental infrastructure deficits that cannot be adequately addressed through property tax revenue alone. And whereas in 2015, the provincial government moved to standardized billing for all non-contract DPP 5.1 locations. And whereas the Ontario government has committed $9.1 billion to Toronto alone to assist with operating deficits and the repatriation of the Don Valley and Gardiner Expressway, and $534 million to Ottawa for the repatriation of Highway 174. And whereas the annual cost of the Ontario Provincial Police Municipal Policing Bureau for small rural non-contract 5.1 municipalities is approximately $428 million, and whereas this annual cost is significantly less than the repatriation cost of the Gardiner Expressway, the Don Valley Parkway, and Highway 174, Ottawa Region, but provides a greater impact to the residents of the province overall. And whereas this will afford relief to small rural municipalities for both infrastructure and operating needs while having a minimal impact on the provincial budget. Now therefore be it resolved that the Township of Horton call on the Ontario government to immediately implement sustainable funding for small rural municipalities by reabsorbing the cost of the Ontario Provincial Police Force back into the provincial budget with no cost recovery to municipalities. And further that council directs staff to circulate this resolution to Premier Doug Ford, Minister Solicitor General, Minister of Finance, and to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, MPP John Yakubuski, and all municipalities in Ontario.
Do I have a mover? Thank you. Councillor Webster, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. All in favor? 2 hands up for that one. Thank you.
That council enact bylaw 2024-39 confirming bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. All in favor? And we are adjourned at 5:25. Thank you all.